So here's the agenda, and then I'll share an intro. After I share my intro, I'll talk about kind of like the big vision, how I got interested in investing in Portugal, the target markets that I started looking at, the investment I ended up making, how I built a network to actually make the deal possible. I'll talk about getting financing, which I hear is quite interesting to a lot of people on the call. I'll go over how I ran the rental numbers as well to convert my vacation home into a rental property. And also a little bit about hiring a property manager and getting the property ready. So I think a lot of you know me already, but for those of you who do not, Marielle Walter, I'm an investor based in Washington, D.C. I'm also the mommy, my most important job of this beautiful now 6.5-year-old. I invest in DC and Maryland and a couple other states and now Portugal. I'll share more about that on the next slide. I also do some coaching and training and partnership groups through Powerhouse Women Real Estate Investing, a group that I run to help educate and empower women through partnerships to invest together, build wealth together. I'm also a passionate philanthropist. I believe in making a lot of money so we can give a lot of money back and do a lot of good. I'm also a completely obsessed traveler, and I spend almost all of my extra funds on traveling, probably contributed to me wanting to buy internationally. So here's a little bit about, I'm sorry, the video keeps popping up and I have to move it around. A little bit about my portfolio. So I started with single family rentals in DC. I started with house hacking, which we were sharing at the beginning. We love that strategy. I sold one of the house hacks, one of the single family rentals, and I used that money to start flipping. And I've done several flips, a small house flipping business in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I also have transitioned into multifamily investing, both in the Eastern Shore. I have my own multifamily. I've also been an LP, a limited partner, passively investing in syndications. And I also have short-term rentals now. Of course, this one in Portugal, as well as two I'm setting up in Maryland, and I've also run a couple in Washington, D.C. I've also done some wholesaling, so a little bit of everything. So the vision, so how I got interested in purchasing in Portugal. So I visited initially, oh my gosh, this was years ago now. You can see my little one here. She was like 1.5, 2 years old. I absolutely loved it. And I knew immediately I had to come back. And I also had learned that it had this growing real estate market. And I knew I had to get on board. This was before COVID. Sadly, I didn't buy then because the prices have gone up crazy over the last few years. However, there are still some deals to be had. It's still a great place to buy. And so I really wanted to purchase what would be a vacation home / early retirement home for myself. And I wanted to have it paid off by vacationers and renters. I was excited about the opportunity to use Portuguese bank money as well, test out European living, and also just kind of have my little starter asset in Portugal to see if I'd like to do more investing there. So the first thing I had to do was build my team over there. Basically, I had to build my network. So the first thing I did was I really hit the expat communities hard. And I actually was looking with some other women as well. One is on the phone today. And we started to really build that network, reach out, try to figure out who had purchased before, who did they work with, who did they love. And then we started connecting with those folks and asking them for their recommendations, connecting with people who they had spoken to and worked with that really enjoyed working with them. And we vetted a ton of people. We had a lot of conversations, and we finally decided to work with this one, kind of more than just a local agent, but with like a consultant. They have some consultants who work with foreign buyers, and they can help you to kind of identify and look into markets across the country versus just one area. So we went with one of these consultants, and through him, I ended up finding multiple different recommendations. And so that's how I found my mortgage broker that I worked with. And I really enjoyed working with him. If I wasn't too sure about it, I would have asked for additional recommendations, but I was really happy with them. I also got a recommendation for a lawyer. The lawyer is super important. You really want to trust your lawyer, so make sure they come highly recommended. I got another recommendation and spoke to another lawyer, but I guess the beauty of working with the consultant's lawyer is that they had, kind of like this volume deal where you got good pricing. And so we went ahead and worked with that lawyer. We also had to have an inspector. I'll talk a little bit about inspections later and how those are different. And of course, a property manager. So for property managers, I talked to both local investors as well as agents, as well as hit the forums. And I spoke to a few, I think 3 or 4 different property management companies before I landed on one, which I'll talk more about later as well. You also need on your team an accountant / tax professional so you can get set up to be receiving income from a rental if you're going to go that route, and also making sure that the taxes are paid and you have the proper documentation that you also need to share with your tax professional in the US. We'll talk a tiny bit about taxes at the end. And I also personally hired a virtual assistant. I just went to Upwork and I searched Portugal and virtual assistant, and I hired somebody there $15 an hour, and they do things for me, like, for example, helping me order IKEA furniture at the IKEA in Porto. Just random things like that that are a little bit easier to have local support for. So that was building the network. So then once I had the consultant, it was all about looking at the different locations that I could potentially invest in. And so I'm not going to go into all of these locations. You'll see here some popular investment locations. And I think the interesting thing about this slide is looking at, like, how much do things cost to purchase versus what can you rent them for. And you'll notice there's some awesome destinations like Lisbon, for example. It's a great city, but it's gotten so expensive. And yeah, you get a little bit more income, but it's not that much more compared to what you can buy in another place and rent for. Like, for example, Porto is more affordable, the second largest city. And you can still rent for, there's strong rents, you know. In Braga, it's even more affordable, and the rents are a little bit lower, but they're not that bad, you know. So Braga is still considered like a very up and coming area. Porto even has room for growth. Vila Nova de Gaia, excuse me, allergies, is outside of Porto. And you can see, like, it's a pretty good deal to buy in that area as far as the price point and what you can get in the rent. So that's an area that we've looked in as well. So I'm going to go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about where did we actually look. We drove through a lot of these places and scoped a little bit. So we did, basically, myself and my fiance and my daughter, we did a real estate road trip. And I was going to scope property that we might want to purchase, that women in the group might be interested in purchasing together. And we wanted to look kind of across the country. And you can do this easily in Portugal, right? It's like such a small country to be able to do a road trip across. And so these are some of the key areas to invest, right? The Algarve has been super popular. Lisbon is super popular, Porto as well, and then the Silver Coast. The Silver Coast has been gaining more popularity, especially like over the last few years. So you can see down from the bottom, Albufeira is in Algarve. And we came up, we did Lisbon, we went through, this is now hitting the Silver Coast, right? Where Nazaré is, Coimbra, Aveiro. I'm botching the true pronunciation of all of the city names, but you get the picture. And then Porto, I absolutely love Porto, and I'm definitely continuing to look for investments there that, you know, I could purchase maybe in group investments with the women in my group. And then we went all the way up to Camina. And we went to Camina on the recommendation of the consultant that we worked with. And he was like, look, northern Portugal, up in this area, you've got beach on one side, you've got river on the other side, and it's still quite affordable because it has European tourism, but it hasn't really blown up yet. And it's still a little off the beaten path and a little sleepier. And we were like, cool. He showed us the price points, and we were like, all right. The price point for the return up there, northern Portugal, is known for pretty strong returns. So after we took a look there, we decided that's actually where we were going to invest. So here's the investment. So in a nutshell, we decided to purchase in Camina, in a place called Seixas, and it is a 5-bedroom flat. And it was 165,000 euro. It later appraised at 172,000 euro. So this is what things are going for in this area. It's not like we bought it super distressed or anything like that. It's actually in pretty good condition, just needs updates. We bought for 25% down with 75% bank financing, and we're doing the short-term and mid-term rental strategy when we're not using it. So this right here is the beach that's nearby that we are obsessed with. This is the view from the balcony. As you can see, it actually overlooks the coast of Spain. So you can hop a boat from Portugal and ride over and check Spain out for the afternoon. So sorry, the slide is busy. There's a lot I wanted to remember to share about financing. So there's some opportunities and challenges to getting the financing. You know, once we have the property, we're moving forward with the financing. And we discovered, hey, it's actually a really similar application process to buying a second home in the US. It was like, and that's how we bought it. We bought it as if it was like, you know, a vacation home, a second home, and you get, you know, better terms. There are investor banks in Portugal, but the terms aren't going to be quite as good. So, we kind of had to share like, pay stubs and tax returns and credit reports and all the same stuff that you would do applying in the US. Again, like I said, I worked with a mortgage broker. That was awesome. He shared terms across 3 of the main banks that do fund foreign buyers. So that was awesome to get to see the different terms and compare. The interest rates we were excited about, especially when we first started looking before they went up. On a 10-year average, they've been around 2.5%, so a lot lower than in the US in most cases, except for during COVID. And of course, they're higher right now. We ended up purchasing, I think it was like 4.5% by the time we purchased. It was changing every month. And but you can get an adjustable rate mortgage and you can actually lock the rate in when it drops. So we're banking on paying higher rates for a few years and then being able to lock it in later at a lower rate. So that's pretty cool too. The banks will, we learned, lend up to 80% LTV to foreigners. However, we didn't get that lucky. We only got 75% LTV. Some of the Portuguese banks do offer 35 and 40-year mortgages pending application age. We didn't get that lucky. We have a 30-year. And taxes and insurance costs are also lower. So that was interesting to discover during the process. So some of the challenges that we came across, home inspections were not considered common there, but they're being done more now because of Americans and perhaps other foreign buyers, but it wasn't as common. So the process is a little bit different. It was more expensive. And it was, in my opinion, less formal. I got like an email, a quick email and a video, and it wasn't a comprehensive report kind of picking the property apart. It was basically saying like, I don't see anything major happening here. So, but nonetheless, we were like, get it done. So the bulk of paperwork is going to be in Portuguese. Some key documents are translated, like the deed, like a term sheet from the lender, but a lot of it is in Portuguese. I'm sure you can pay somebody to translate every single thing, but there's a lot of trust involved in the process and trusting the lawyer that you're working with to be reviewing things for you. So just take note of that. It can take several months to close. It's not like you'll close in 30 days kind of thing. I don't know what the standard average is, but it took us several months, like at least 3 or 4 months to get our loan closed. And that's, because of some of the things in the process that we had to do. We didn't have our Portuguese bank account set up just yet, for example. That took some extra time. So it depends how far you are in that process of getting set up as well when you go try to get your mortgage. So the interest rates, again, they're high now compared to where we ideally wanted to lock them in when we started looking, but everywhere, right? And another thing you want to keep your eye on is that the laws and policies are changing quickly. A lot of you probably heard of the Golden Visa program, which was super popular, and now they're doing away with the AL, which is like the short-term rental license. That is being limited in some of the major cities. So things change, and especially right now, things seem to be changing kind of quickly. So you want to just keep an eye on that. So I just wanted to give us a quick bank financing, some bank financing details here. So this is what they shared with us, kind of breaking it down for us. So we went with Novo Banco because they were the ones that we thought might go up to 20%. We thought for us putting down 20% and then funding the 80% LTV, but we ended up getting 25%, but we went with Novo Banco. We did a variable rate, which changes every 12 months. So you get locked for 12, then it changes, and so on. And eventually you can lock it in if you'd like. So they go off the Euribor, which means this is the rate that they'll look at, and then the bank will add their spread to it. So the Euribor will change and the bank will add their spread. The bank initially gave us a spread of they're going to add, to get to our rate, they were going to add 1.45%. And the mortgage broker actually told us we could negotiate that and ended up getting it down to 1.25%. So now every time our rate changes, it'll just be an additional 1.25% always on whatever the Euribor is. So we ended up, in this example they had sent us, which was actually like the month before we closed or something, we were around 4.3% interest. The amount to be fine, and again, we got a 30-year. The amount to be financed, of course, was 75% of the total amount. So it was around 124,000. Our monthly payment then being around 610 euro. Life insurance, you see a line here. So some of the banks and sometimes they'll require life insurance. And it's not like the one that you have in the US works. It's something specific that they would require you to purchase that protects them. We didn't have to get it. I don't know the reasoning behind that, but we weren't required to. It's not super expensive if you do, so don't worry about that. And then we have the property insurance, and this is like pretty basic property insurance that covers major things happening and protects the bank. And again, it's really cheap. It's only about 14 euro a month. Then there were the global, so the global monthly charge is basically the total is around 624 euros per month for the mortgage payment. So then you'll see here the closing costs. Basically, we had loan charges, we had acquisition charges. There's some significant taxes that you pay at close. The property taxes overall are cheaper, so you pay more taxes when you close. So it was over 7,000 euro, which brought our total then between like the 25% that we had to bring, and then these costs as well, close to 50,000 euro, specifically with the additional cost of like the lawyer and the inspection. So that's kind of where it landed. So I know I'm running through this quickly. I'll do a Q&A at the end, of course. So then we were looking, well, of course, as we went along evaluating the property, we looked at short-term rental numbers as well. And then we tried to be super conservative with ours. And then when we went with a specific property management company, we went with a company that came well recommended off of one of the Facebook groups, and we asked them for examples of their listings. Great listings, great reviews, woman-owned business. I was excited about that, and they're highly local. I like the idea of working with a highly local property management company because they really get their market. And there's a lot of property management companies in Portugal that are big, and they'll manage like primarily in cities, but then they'll have like a couple of properties that they manage here and there. And they would have worked with me. I found their rates were higher, and I just worried they didn't quite have the local knowledge. So we're testing it all out, right? We're testing out our team. We're building over time, so we're going to see how it goes. But we're excited to work with these women right now, and they shared with us this is what they think they can get when the rental is fully stabilized. So this isn't going to be like year one where we're getting set up and we're getting our first reviews and things like that. This is going to be like when we are established. So, the first year we're happy to break even and make a little cash flow, and then build until we think we're actually going to get some strong returns, which you'll see on the next slide. So you can see here that we're planning on doing midterm rental in the slowest months, which would be January, February, and March, ideally getting around 1,300 euro per month. We have the middle season, basically April to June, September, and October, around 260 euros per night, up to, in the high season, getting around 320 euros per night. So in addition, there are some property management setup fees. And so I'm putting these here because these differed drastically across property management companies. Some of them wanted like $2,000 up front. This property management company was around 500. So you really want to check the costs and what's included when you're talking to property management companies. So the AL, which is basically the application to get your license to do the short-term rental, is about 80 euros. The staging and professional photos, around 200 euros. The listing creation across the platforms to get your listings live, close to 200 euros. So it's all around 500 euro. For all that. So some considerations, the figures, like I mentioned, again, they're for an established rental. The occupancy rates are going to vary a lot based on the season. Sometimes there's even like promotions and things that you'll see reflected on the next slide that we'll do during off season to up our occupancy. And again, check if you're going to go for it and get a rental in Portugal, check with a lot of different property management companies and get a sense of what their fees are across the board, not just the monthly, but the startup fees as well, and what that includes. So here's some of, whoops, let me see if I can go back. Okay, there we go. So our total income before cost based on the projections from the last slide is around $44,000 per year income. We have the property management fee. So once they're managing, not in the startup phase, they're charging 15% on income across the board. So this was quite affordable compared to other property management companies. We were quoted 20%, 25%. And the thing is, though, that they don't include the cleaning costs. So we're going to be learning what the cleaning costs are going to be. Like, we know what they are hourly and whatnot, but to really know concrete, we're going to have to run it for a while and see how that pans out. and see how much are we really saving. We think that we're going to save going this route, but we're not sure how much just yet. So there's also the platform fee using things like Airbnb. There's the cleaning fees, as I mentioned, that we estimated. Say we're doing some promotions and things like that, we docked some money for that. The mortgage and insurance costs we're estimating for repairs and maintenance. We have utilities costs as well, consumables, things like, soap and shampoo. So the total cost around 32,000, leaving us with income after our costs of about 11,500 euro. This should all be in euro, by the way, and not in dollar. So it's going to be a solid return given the amount of money that we have in there, even for a US investment. Oftentimes in Portugal, you'll see returns of like 5-6%, like maybe 7. Sometimes they get higher, but it's much more common to invest for a lower return than in the US, where you're expecting like 10 or more all the time. But in this area, running a successful short-term rental, the returns can still be exciting. So just a little bit on also getting these types of returns, we're going to have to do some renovations. So on the left-hand side, you can see some befores. I couldn't find a kitchen before. I honestly, I had taken video when I was there, and I'm trying to like extract photos from it. So it's, it's outdated tile, it's kind of like outdated cream color, old paint, things like that. It doesn't have nice trim and things, but one of the perks is it already had heat, which not all of the properties have heat. It's not as common. So to buy something that already has heat and can be rented year round is definitely a perk. This is my daughter right here thinking that this is a doll bath, the bidet, by the way. That was cute. So, and on the other side, our property manager put together a mood board for us and basically made some recommendations on how she could see us renovating and furnishing to get the returns that we would like to get. So while our budget, we also had the contractor already come and quote. And while we are not going to be able to do quite this fabulous of a kitchen, I think we are going to do pretty similar for everything. We are going to use the cabinets that are already there. We're going to have them painted, new hardware, backsplash, probably new counter. We're going to open up a wall, ideally, because interestingly enough, the renovations are a bit more affordable from the quotes that we've gotten initially. And with 10,000, we're able to get the place painted and get a bathroom or 2 renovated and some of the work done in the kitchen. So we're kind of going to start with a good base on the renovations and then maybe, over time, renovate further. So we're going to try to stick to about a $10,000 renovation budget, maybe move a little bit over that. And then we're looking at around $5,000 to furnish. That's mainly like big bulk items from IKEA, and then more local staging items to polish off the furnishing. So I know that I anticipate that I'm going to get questions about taxes, and I am not a tax professional in any country. And so I really can't comment, but I wanted to drop a few bullets here from a resource that I thought was pretty good, an accounting resource. So as a non-resident of Portugal, you pay a tax rate of 28%, but you only have to pay that on 35% of the total rental income. They consider the remaining 65% as expenses in running the business. So overall, this accountant was saying that you basically have a effective tax rate of less than 10%. And some people ask, like, what if I'm in the US while I'm receiving the income? Like, yes, you still have to report it. In Portugal, you still have to pay on it because you're generating the money there. But what's interesting is there's a bilateral double tax agreement. So when you're making money in Portugal, and you're being taxed there, you get a document that you can show in the US. And at least according to my tax professional, then you don't have to pay taxes twice.